What are called classes in other realms have been dubbed jobs in Final Fantasy. The moniker fits for most fans, as once you find out where you belong in the traditional JRPG party, it's tempting to fill the same role every time for years and years. In the ranking process, we agreed that functionality and nostalgia were equally important. We mustn't forget what some of these mean to Final Fantasy's legacy, but we also can't forget to honor those that have proven indispensable when a questing team comes together. As new jobs come to the world of Final Fantasy XIV with its first expansion, Heavensward, here are our 10 favorite jobs in the series. In a world filled with weapons and magic, the monk prefers to use his fists. Despite lacking equipment, save for a pair of claws, they deal as much damage as any other class. They also avoid heavy armor, sticking to robes and hats. The first monk to receive a name was Yang from Final Fantasy IV, but the job premiered in the original Final Fantasy and returned in Final Fantasy III. Perhaps the most famous, however, is Tifa from Final Fantasy VII, who dishes out massive damage with her powerful punches. We have a lot of affection for these bare-knuckle brawlers, enough for it to slug its way to number 10. Bard certainly isn't the flashiest Final Fantasy job, but that doesn't take away from its usefulness. Through the power of song, bards take a backseat role in whatever party they're in by buffing and healing allies. Additionally, they're also quite adept at hindering enemies through nasty status effects. It's this versatility that earns them a spot on our list, as well as perhaps the most lovable bard of all, Edward. His spooniness, courage, and romanticism make him a character we'll never forget. While other spellcasters can purchase spells or learn them from artifacts, blue mages have to study in the field. By observing items in combat, blue mages learn their abilities, acquiring an entire range of skills, unavailable to most other characters. The required conditions vary from game to game. Some blue mages have to be targeted by an attack to learn it. Others, such as Strago in Final Fantasy VI, simply have to witness it, while Quina in Final Fantasy IX actually has to eat the enemies to digest their powers. In any case, combat experience and a little patience can net a blue mage some of the rarest skills available. The key to a red mage's power is diversity, as they draw inspiration and abilities from an assortment of other jobs. They can equip weapons and armor that black and white mages typically can't, ensuring that they're capable fighters on the front lines. They're perfect for when you're unsure whether to fill that last position with damage or healing. We remember them fondly in Final Fantasy XI, where the job's regen ability was the oil necessary to make any party composition run smoothly. Not to mention, they're often the sharpest dressed characters in each of their installments of the franchise. Ninjas have appeared throughout franchise history, starting as the upgrade of the Thief class in the first Final Fantasy. Shadow from Final Fantasy VI is the most famous of their kind, next to Edge from 4 and Yuffie from 7. Ninja recently became a playable job in Final Fantasy XIV. Similar to Thief, ninjas can steal, an often underappreciated skill, especially during boss fights. Ninjas can dual wield and throw some of the most powerful weapons from each game. Ninjutsu magic even allows certain ninjas to manipulate the energies of nature itself, unleashing a variety of deadly and flashy attacks. With many of the entries on this list, we have very practical reasons for loving them. A lot of our love for the Dark Knight comes from it just being awesome. The traditional Dark Knight armor first worn by Cecil in Final Fantasy IV is both menacing and iconic, making anyone who wears it look like an iron demon. It's quite the compliment when you can just look at an image and say to yourself, I want to play that. Dark Knight abilities often require a portion of the user's health to perform, which is also appealing. It's a fascinating idea to put party members at risk in order to push for as much damage as possible. In practically every fantasy game ever made, there's at least one wizard flinging fire and ice at all sorts of nasty creatures. The fact that Final Fantasy made its variation of the popular archetype so distinct and memorable is quite an achievement. At this point, the pointy hat, shrouded face, and yellow eyes of the Black Mage are nearly as recognizable as Chocobos, Moogles, and Cactars. More importantly, though, Black Mages are just a blast to play. Destroying enemies with a single flare or powerful elemental spell is immensely satisfying. We also have to give a special shout out to Vivi, the inquisitive Black Mage from Final Fantasy IX that stole our hearts. There are other jobs in Final Fantasy that heal, but you're always making things tougher than they need to be if you don't have a white mage. They can revive fallen party members, incinerate undead, and make your HP meter go from empty to full with a single cast. They've also cornered the market on Holy, one of the most powerful spells of any class. They're also synonymous with the series, with their red-trimmed robes reappearing again and again. They were in the very first game, and their value cannot be overstated in the massively multiplayer Final Fantasies 11 and 14. Master that job, and you'll make a lot of friends. Leaping through the skies above, the lance-wielding Dragoon Knights are irreversibly linked to the franchise. They wear some of the most badass armor in the series that invokes the imagery of dragons with wings, spikes, and scales. Using their trademark jump ability, Dragoons leap in the air, avoid attacks for a turn, then impale their foes with tremendous downward force. One of the most famous Dragoons in history is the stoic knight Kain Highwind from Final Fantasy IV. And the first expansion to Final Fantasy XIV, Heavensward, looks to heavily feature the stylish and punishing class. Some jobs can do a terrifying amount of damage. Some jobs can support other party members in pivotal ways, and some jobs are just selfishly fun to play. But no job has been featured more in our favorite Final Fantasy stories than the Summoner. First appearing in Final Fantasy IV, important figures like Rydia, Yuna, and Eiko have all held a critical role. The summons themselves often provide crucial links to the overall narrative, such as their crystallized form in 6 or the appearance of the Primals in 14 Online, and their ridiculously long animations are some of the greatest highlights from each installment. By adding one summoner to your party, you're also bringing dozens of diverse fighters to the fray. It's often the most important and diverse job in Final Fantasy. Our D&D party gets some serious upgrades in the latest chapter of our tabletop adventures, and you can take a quick look at what games are on the horizon with our rapid rundown of July releases on our second channel, GT Reviews. We'll see you next Sunday for another GT Countdown.